back, everybody, to 2021 Apologetics. We will try and endeavour to pick up where we left off just before Christmas, and we'll move along a little bit today. I've got to go through the false theories of the origin of religion. We started on those just before Christmas. We talked about the fear theory, that people follow religion out of fear. We're going to go through a few more of them today, and then we'll go into supernatural revelation in religion itself. So the actual meaning in terms of revelation, what it actually is, what it is not, and then start to open it up from there. Okay, so as we were, so today's the 18th. June 2021. Okay, so we were looking at the false theories about the origin of religion. Okay, and the first one we touched on was the fear theory. Fear was just used as a way to keep people under control, and it's still used as a bit of an excuse today. People say people are only going to religion out of fear, and it's the fear of the unknown, and so there is, when there were such things in nature, flash of lightning, a volcano, people can't control these things, and so these were used as a means to bring the people under control, some sort of subversive mechanism in order to be able to control people. So this was the first one that we looked at. The second one we're going to look at tonight is the fraud theory. Okay. Alright, so the fraud theory generally posits the ideas that in early times of humanity, that cunning people or shrewd people set themselves up in society as a priesthood in order to secure for themselves positions of respect or positions of easy living and honour and so on and so forth. And so they set themselves up as the ones who are intermediaries between the common people and higher powers. And therefore they play on the simplicity of the masses, they play on the credulity that people want to believe something, and so they play on this in order to be able to enrich themselves. There's probably more of that now than there was in the ancient world, more than anything else. Goodness me. Having been in the third world for a while, you see that it's a business, basically. There was a business in the first world. You're going to go look at some of the mega churches and what these people get away with. I mean, like wearing piano keys instead of teeth half the time. Come on. I mean, it's some of these guys posing in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s in the US. It was just incredible. People would give them vast amounts of money, and they were so obviously frauds in the whole thing. To this day, some of them are still quite well respected. But again, it's the whole fraud theory type thing, playing on people's natural ideals. And a lot of these people typically, and we still see this today, claim to have communication with the divine. And we hear this all the time. We've spoken about this right from the beginning of this course. The Lord spoke to me. Prove it straight away. Prove it. You've got to have some sort of supernatural proof in order to be able to claim the divine. So, but if we were to go back in time into ancient civilizations, the claim is this is how religion came about, was people working on this fraud theory. But if these people set themselves up as a priesthood presupposes that there is a religion anyway. Because if you're setting yourself up as a priest, then automatically either people would say, oh, what? We've never heard of that. Really? This is quite new. This is like electricity? Really? What's that thing? But it presupposes that there is already religion if people are setting themselves up as a priesthood and those to be the ones who are organising this religion. In other words, it seems as if by reason that religion comes before any such ideas, that religion is there anyway, because we're looking at what are the origins of this of religious ideals. And therefore, the whole idea of the fraud theory seems to indicate that mankind was very stupid, not very smart. We're a lot smarter now. Well, if we're a lot smarter now, how come these fraudsters are still out there? And they are still obviously out there en masse, in large, large numbers. All right, so the third theory is the law theory. And this looks at the idea of the legislators in ancient civilizations. So in all civilizations there are legislators. They might not always be obeyed, but there are those who legislate, those who make laws within society, who set up specific law within whatever it is. It's a group of people, whether it's an overall society. And this theory says that in order to secure reverence for laws, it's a bit hard to prove this theory, they appeal to powers of more than earthly authority as their inspiration. And therefore, if they're to say to people, look, these laws come from a higher power, therefore if the laws come from a higher power, the higher power is always watching you. Even though we can't watch you and we make the laws, but you can't get away with that because there is always a higher power watching you. And so they're claiming this to be an origin of religion, because legislators would therefore themselves be held in honour and fear of, because they are the ones who somehow or other have connections with the divinities, or spokespeople of the divinities. But the question again is always one of these circular ones in a lot of these types of theories. How can legislators appeal to the gods and expect any hope of success in doing so if humans don't already believe in gods? So in other words, their belief in gods presuppose this idea anyway, because if you claim as a legislator, all right, we're going to legislate, we're going to put these new laws in, and the new laws are being put in here because of 6G radio waves will toast you anyway, then people would laugh at them. It's totally ridiculous, there's no such thing. But if there was something as 6G radio waves that already exist, then people would start saying, oh, okay, that might actually be true what these guys are saying, because we know 6G radio waves are already existing here and now. So the same thing by using this idea that religion has come just from legislators or from those who make laws presupposes that there is anyway a belief in God and a belief in gods, plural or singular. The fourth such theory is the ghost theory. This one takes a little bit even harder to believe. So this one is probably more, I wouldn't say harder to believe. People have often, for a very long time, believed in the spirits, and the spirits especially of the dead, those who have passed, ancestors and ancestor worship, and that ancestors go back into some place but still want to have and do have communication and effect on society, and they affect us by talking through mediums, through whether it is people who can hear or speak to them, whether it is through animals, whether it is through nature. But people have for a long period of time believed in such things, but not universally. Our knowledge of ancient civilizations tells us that there are some civilizations that come, at least as far as records can be seen, they did have quite a lot of belief in in ancestor worship and communication with ancestors. But there are many ancient civilizations who did not have this at the same time. So it's almost like a local theory, but I mean it can be expanded in a certain way. They are claiming that this idea, because of ancestor worship, or the idea that ghosts of ancestors still work amongst us, there is therefore a cult of the unseen, that you can't see we're having contacts with, it must be therefore, just saying it must be ancestors, because they are the ones who were here amongst us. They're no longer able to be seen amongst us, and so there is this unseen that is trying to speak to us at all time. But this comes about through the ideas just of the dead somehow living, not as if it is something automatically higher. This theory is all very well in a certain way, but all it really does is explains that man believed in powers outside of human powers, but it doesn't explain how this comes about. How do these powers come? All it's basically saying is that, well, yes, there are unseen powers, and there are unseen powers that seem to be able to communicate with us. How this comes about, it doesn't really say. It's just that, I suppose that it takes some facts that we know from the ancient world, but it doesn't necessarily say that this is how religion itself began. It's sort of picking up different points from certain places, throwing them into a bucket, and then say, religion began because we know of these things. But it doesn't really seem that conclusive in the end. What it certainly does, or what it does, it sort of removes the idea that reason has a part of this, because in a certain way, ancient civilizations recognizing that the souls of those who were amongst them can live on presupposes a little bit that their reason is working this out. Reason works out that our supernatural soul doesn't die. But they are sort of putting it upon entirely like a superstitious type thing. That this idea of religion has come about as a superstition that ghosts are living there, therefore religion has come about. What they're sort of denying in all this is that perhaps some of these ancient civilizations reasoned that the souls of the dead can't be destroyed, because the soul actually has nothing that you can destroy. If it is an immaterial thing, then how can you destroy an immaterial thing? Yes, the body can die. What about the soul? And obviously these ancient people had these ideas that the soul seems to live on. So this presupposes that it is reason that works out that there's religion more than just superstition. The last theory that was written down, well, there were two last theories I didn't really even take them too seriously. The first one was a social theory. Which sort of posits the idea that because humans were social and started living in social groups going way, way back into antiquity, that because of living in social groups there was social pressure. And just by having this idea of people living together, therefore somehow or other there's an idea that they need to be doing certain things, and people were afraid of kicking back against this, but it's not a very compelling theory. It's almost like an early 20th century construct whereby they try and put together theories on what social order forces upon people. It's very almost sort of like Karl Marxian in a certain way, that social order does this, and people are only doing it because a group mentality has said so, and therefore there's no other real explanation outside that. So that was one of the other ones put forward. I didn't really find that one too compelling, because the fallacy of this theory is it makes the individual man amongst the primitives a bit of a non-entity. In other words, all people had to do this, and yet what about the individual? Couldn't an individual say, no, this is stupid, I disagree with this idea? Why couldn't they do that? They have the same human nature that we do, and we would easily be able to say nowadays, no, I don't believe in that, because we just disagree. This sort of forces upon the idea that the individual man was not so smart back in those days. The last theory posited is that of instinct. I thought this one was also kind of stupid. Instinct theory. Whereby, this was made up by somebody from a leader of the French school of sociology. So again, these people tend to make these things up. I suppose they would justify their being professors sometimes. It amounts to this: human societies, like animal societies, obey instincts. Conscience and reason are only instincts, but expressed in abstract language. these instinctive common ways of acting have taken such a deep root in us, so our instinctive ways of acting have taken such a deep root within us that they endure as certain prejudices. Thus consciousness, even reason consciousness of the existence of God and the need of religion is nothing but a prejudice, and it has nothing to do with fact. Again, this is very much a sociological professor's making up of an idea, and it's not really based on anything other than some sort of idea that we all follow along with a sort of herd immunity because we belong, I suppose, in a similar way to the social theory. And yet you'd have to say, okay, so professor who worked this out, did you work this out because you were in together with a certain prejudice of other sociologists, or did you use actual reason to work this out? Obviously he thinks he's used reason to work it out. The very thing that he's denying, other people used reason to work out that religion and God truly exist. He's saying these are prejudices, people live together, and because these prejudices that have grown through a long period of time, they automatically just thought, well, you know, it has to be a God. Whereas he's obviously thinking he's using reason. The very claim that we say, ancient people were able to work all these things out because reason itself did it, and it doesn't have to be a prejudice. So he shoots himself in the foot by the same rationale that he uses. All right, so those are some of the false claims as to the beginnings or the origins of religion. I'm going to go now and switch as we move into the second chapter of this book, and we're going to look at supernatural revelation, and we're going to look at the supernatural revelation in religion, because we've been talking about things outside of religion and how these things come naturally to man. We've looked at reason being the main driving force behind the understanding of man that there is a God. So now we're going to look at the supernatural revelation in religion. So this is like a turn in the corner with in this whole course. Remember in our last class we talked about supernatural, the meaning of supernatural. All nod your heads at the same time if you remember what we talked about. We talked about supernatural. You don't remember? Okay, we talked about that which is above our nature, our human nature, that we can't change, we can't alter. It's the same no matter where you are in the world, because we are humans. We don't have dog nature, we don't have cat nature, we don't have dolphin nature or anything like that. We're humans, and therefore our nature is shared across all things. When we talk about that which is super, the Latin word meaning above, those things which are beyond or above our nature, so absolutely impossible for human beings to be able to do those things which are supernatural. So we're going to be talking about revelation, that which is supernatural revelation. And this becomes almost like the key point which proves the origin, or not even the origin of religion, the religious claim itself is the supernatural. When things go to that level, we realize, okay, no human being can do this. This has to be above, or this is above our nature. So therefore, it's something as a work of God. All right. So in the works of creation, God reveals himself. In the works of creation, okay? Because it's created out of nothing. God reveals himself because it's supernatural. For starters, to create is supernatural. And he also reveals his perfections to our reason. When we looked at God, what is the meaning of God, and we looked at all of these perfections, our reason is able to understand these things. Since this revelation can be received, and it can be recognized by man's unaided natural knowing powers, we would call this natural revelation. So this is what we looked at in the first part of this course. The natural revelation that the existence of the universe, that the universe has come from somewhere. It must have been created. And if it was created, our natural powers perceive this, our reason together with this is able to work out, and therefore through natural revelation, that's what we did in the first part of this course, okay? We look outside and we realize, all right, I can see that. I don't need, it's not supernatural in and of itself, but through my natural powers I can understand this. All right, so this chapter is going to discuss whether God has manifested truths which lie beyond the scope and grasp of unaided human reason. Okay? The assertion that God has done so is made and is going to be supported by a very reasoned, a rational argument. We're going to make this claim and we're going to back it up with a rational argument. Okay, so there are going to be two different articles. The article one is the meaning, the possibility, and necessity of supernatural revelation. And the second article is going to be the fact of supernatural revelation. So today we begin with the meaning of supernatural revelation. So let's look at our meaning. All right, let's look at a nominal definition. Okay, so revelation is coming from re, which is the Latin for back, or from, and the Latin word velare, which means to veil. Okay? Re, which means to go back, or from, and then velare means to veil, and therefore it's pretty clear what re-velare means. It means the drawing back or removal of a veil. Make sense? Language matters. Okay. Nominal definition. Re-velare, to draw back or to remove the veil. The word therefore is quite suitably employed to indicate the removal of the veil of ignorance, we could say. Because it's something we don't know, we're ignorant of it, okay? Which hangs between man's knowing powers and the thing which man does not know. You would want it to be revealed to you. Children have things revealed to them at all the time. They go to school to have knowledge of certain things revealed to them, whether it's science or mathematics or counting, whatever. Just it's revealed, the ignorance is drawn back, and they're able to learn. Right, so let's look at another definition. We'll call this one a real definition. Remember, language counts. It is very important when we are in apologetics. We've got it, yes?
Revelation, the book, is also called Apocalypse. What language is that? Is that the same?
That's the Greek, yeah. So we'll come into that later on. I mean, it's pretty much only called Apocalypse in the Catholic one. I don't think it is in the Protestant Bible. I think it's only called Revelation there. Yeah. Yeah, because even on the island of Patmos, it's called the Cave of the Apocalypse. Nice place too. Anyway, the real definition. So, revelation is the manifestation of truth, otherwise unknown. The manifestation of truth, otherwise unknown. comma, or known, but obscurely known. Right, so it has three elements within it. The first element is a revealer. That is, the one who makes the truth known. The second part is a truth revealed. Third part, a recipient. The one to whom the revealed truth is manifested. So, get that down. So if the revealer and the revealed are both human beings, the truth is a natural truth that is made known to them. If the revealer, let's see, if the revealer is a man, the revelation is human. If the revealer is God, the revelation is divine. Okay? So we're talking about supernatural or divine revelation or natural revelation. 1 + 1 = 2. Children learn that. It's a natural revelation. The child is there. It's unveiled. 2. Wow. Unless you're Baldrick and he was never able to work out even 1 + 1 = 2. It's a great scene in Blackadder when he's trying to teach him about counting beans. So, Baldrick, what do 2 beans plus 2 beans make? A very small soup. Wonderful. Okay, so that distinction, if the revealer is a human, it's a natural revelation. If the revealer is God, and then it will be a divine revelation. Okay? So that's just the real definition as we see it. So even if I'm going to be using the word revelation in the next few classes, I'm always talking about divine unless I make a specific notation that I'm talking about just a natural revelation. Because in this class we're talking about under the heading supernatural revelation. Okay? So let's put a really tight definition on the whole thing, especially on supernatural revelation. So I'm going to take this off and I'll put a tight definition on supernatural. Everybody got that down? Wonderful. Is blue readable at the back there? If it's not, move closer. Okay, so supernatural revelation. A manifestation of truth made by Almighty God to rational creatures in a manner other than that which is usual. and natural to them in the acquiring of knowledge. Of knowledge. So there's a few small things that we can talk about in that, but we'll be breaking this down as we move forward. So a manifestation of truth doesn't really matter exactly at the beginning of the sentence in which way it is manifested, but a truth is made by Almighty God to rational creatures. And it is made to rational creatures in a manner other than that which is usual and natural to them in the acquiring of knowledge. So in other words, it's outside their natural bounds of acquiring knowledge. Okay? Obviously we're going to give examples, but we just wanted a tight explanation of what we're talking about here. So the truth which is revealed is also a determinant in the character of the revelation. If God was to tell us the sun will come up tomorrow, okay, it's not really much of a truth, and it's something that we would automatically know, but we're not 100% sure. But it's not necessarily going to be that much of a claim to the supernatural revelation. If the truth was such that man could know it, and perhaps does know it, without supernatural revelation, but is nevertheless supernaturally revealed, it makes the revelation supernatural in manner, but not in its substance. Okay? So let's say God appears in this room and says, the sun is going to come up tomorrow. Whoa! God appealed to it. God just appeared. It was right in the camera. God, whoa! Okay, that's a supernatural appearance of God, but what he's taught us is entirely natural in the substance of what he said. The manner in which he turned up here and told us with a Kiwi accent as well. Because he was just home on holiday or something like that. I don't know. What accent would God have if he was speaking English? Remember that ice cream ad from a few years ago? When the kid was doing some bombs, eating some ice cream. I'm just here on holiday. I'm back home for a while. Okay. If, however, the truth revealed is of such a character that man could not possibly know it without revelation, then the revelation is supernatural in substance as well as in manner. Okay, the immediate example that gets out to us now is the Trinity. Okay, so God reveals the Trinity at the baptism of Christ. So it's impossible for us in a natural way to work out any idea of a Trinity, whereas it is possible for us to work out that the sun is going to come up tomorrow. Or that phraseology meaning that the earth spins around and we'll be able to see the sun tomorrow. Okay? So to illustrate, that God exists, man knows by reason, arguing from creation. Just the data, the fact that we know that creation exists. This naturally known truth is supernaturally revealed. Such revelation is supernatural in its manner only. That means the manner in which creation exists. So creation exists. The manner, therefore, that this was brought about has to be supernatural, because it's way beyond our nature to do. Okay, so that's the first half of it. That God is one infinite and undivided substance subsisting in three persons is a truth which man could not know unless it is divinely revealed. Therefore, its revelation is supernatural in substance as well as in manner. Sometimes the term in form is used instead of manner, so I'll put these up when we get to them. Just got to make sure that we are understanding some of these terms. At the moment, we're talking about the substance of the revelation and the manner or the form of the revelation. So the substance, the thing which has been revealed, as opposed to the manner in which it has been revealed. Supernatural manner means that, hang on a minute, how did that happen? God just appearing here amongst us. That would be supernatural in the manner in which he has appeared, even if he doesn't say anything to us. So no revelation by way of substance, but if God was to appear here, then that would be supernatural in its manner. Okay? So we're just talking about different words that we don't normally use in our common parlance. All right? So that is the meaning of revelation. Now we're going to look about the possibility of supernatural revelation. Okay? Anybody need these notes more? Right, the possibility of supernatural revelation. Somebody put a little pack of Smarties here. It's been revealed to me. Not quite supernatural, but not going to make us any smarter either. All right, so if a thing is not possible, this is due to one of two reasons. There is a contradiction and the very concept or idea of the thing itself, square circle, contradiction, okay, so it's not possible. Or there is in existence no power great enough to produce or make or do such a thing. So the square circle is impossible by the fact of these reasons. It is a contradiction in itself. Okay? Square is square, circle is circle. They are contradictory ideals, and therefore they cannot be one. There's a contradiction in terms, a square circle. One part of it is a denial of the other, and the result is zero. If it's either square or it's either circular, it can't be both in and of themselves at the same time. So therefore, the final result of square circle is zero. It's not even a mathematical equation, but if it was a mathematical equation, as a word, it's nonsensical, okay? Not possible. There is nothing impossible by the second reason if we include the boundless power of Almighty God in our concept of existing powers capable of producing effects. But if there is any indignity, unworthiness, or uselessness about the thing, then the boundless power of God cannot produce it. In other words, it would just not be right. There would be something completely and utterly wrong in the concept of something. Because God is all perfect, and an unworthy thing would not square off with his majesty and his dignity, while a useless thing would not square off with God's wisdom. So we've got to consider these things when we're talking about possibilities. Again, we're very ephemeral in these ideas. We're talking about ideas here. So absolutely speaking, God's power is boundless and can produce anything that is a thing and not a contradiction. Okay? Because a contradiction is no thing other than a contradiction. But relatively speaking, that means with relation to God's all-perfect nature, certain things which are possible in view of God's power are not possible in view of his other perfections. Okay? Because something would just be too undignified for God to make. It would just be wrong, because God is all perfect. So we investigate the subject of supernatural revelation, asking whether something would be possible. All right, it's possible to God's absolute power. It is the revealing of truth. Okay, this is within God's absolute power, and absolutely no difficulty whatsoever for God to reveal truth, because God is true. There's nothing incongruous within God. But it's just these earlier ideas, just remember, square circle is just a non-thing, just like something which would be absolutely and utterly undignified, or something which would just be wrong as a concept. Okay, God's not going to go down there, but truths are something which God could easily reveal. Because God knows all truth, and He has the power to manifest truth. Okay, so, is it possible to God's relative power to do this? Is there not some indignity in the thought of an all-perfect God revealing truths to imperfect creatures? So that's just a rhetorical question, and the answer, not at all. It's no indignity for the wisest teacher to instruct the most ignorant and backward pupil, because we have reason. Okay? That's the thing that separates us from the other creatures. God created us in His image and likeness. The fact that God has given this creature, us, reason, means that it is reasonable for God to reveal truths to us that we cannot work out by our own power. Such an action adds to the opinion we hold of the wise teacher. Therefore, there's no indignity in the thought of God teaching men, and no unworthiness in this idea. Again, a rhetorical question: is not revelation a mark of unwisdom in God? It's not an evidence that His work of creation is imperfect. So one could say, well, hang on a minute, if God's all wise, how come He created these people and they didn't know this? Why didn't He just create them with that knowledge? Isn't that a failing on God's part? Okay, it's a philosophical question. If God exists and God is all perfect and all true, and He creates creatures that have reason, surely He would have given them the reasons that they need, or the truths that they need to know. Otherwise there will be a failing, and again, like I say, it's a rhetorical question. God has His own ends. So we have our end. The end of the human race is to be with God. But God Himself has His own ends. He's not bound to make a thing absolutely perfect in His order. Okay, He set up the human race. And He set it up in His order. Very much like the fall was something that God allowed to happen. It's not a failing on God's part when we see the whole plan going from the creation of the universe and the idea of rational creatures right through to the end of time, as it is in terms of this earth, and the end of time when all will be revealed, and then all will be either in heaven or hell in the end. When God has that already at the beginning of time part of His plan, then it's kind of foolish for us to sort of think, oh, well, He didn't really get it right. You see, why didn't He teach us these things to begin with? But that's not looking at God's own ends, because He's created this with this final end in sight. Okay, so we've always got to think on different levels. We can't just think on the level of where we are. We've also got to think on the level of what's God's plan for the whole thing. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes. You're very quiet at the beginning of 2021. What's up? Strange.
We did announce in front that the class was on.
Yeah, it was in the bulletin. Yeah.